Good afternoon, good morning to some of you, good evening to certain. Thank you very much for attending our webinar on our Eastern European coffee market. I would start to share some house rules with you. We are not able to see or hear you. So please, any questions you have, please put them into the question box and we will answer them after the presentation. If we do not have enough time for all your questions, we will answer them later to you by mail. You will receive them, as well as the presentation and this recorded webinar you will receive also within the coming days after our webinar. So thanks again for attending and taking your time. I give a very small introduction on myself on CBI. My name is Lisanne Groothuis. I am CBI Market Intelligence Program Manager for these sectors: coffee, cocoa, home decoration, home textiles. And I have been active in green coffee trading for over than 25 years. I give you a very brief introduction on what kind of work we do within CBI. Our mission is to connect small to medium-sized exporters in developing countries with the European market, and thereby we would like to contribute to sustainable and inclusive economic growth. We work with certain target countries, which have been set by our ministry. You see them here on the screen. There are quite some countries where we target and we would like to start our projects. We are active in 14 sectors. And of course, amongst them, you see them here, we are active in coffee. We work with several target groups. We work with exporters, small to medium-sized exporters. We work with business support organizations. We work with importers throughout Europe, and we work with policymakers. We have 5 core competences. Next slide, please, Gustavo. Whereby number 1 to 4 is part of our projects which we start in our target countries. And we have, of course, the European Union market intelligence, and that's basically why we have these webinars here today. Then I have a small explanation of what kind of information can we provide to you. So we make market information studies, whereby we make a division between market analysis. So what is the demand, what are the trends, and what kind of opportunities can this help for you? And we have market entry studies, buyer requirement tips for finding European buyers, tips for doing business, and how to organize your exports. And besides these 2 modules, we make country fact sheets and we make product fact sheets. And we make news items, we hold webinars like we do today. We have all this information on our CBI.eu website, whereby you can go to market information, you can select your own sector, and within the sector you can find all these studies that we make for you, and can be very useful for you to export your products or your services to Europe. Next, please, Gustavo. So here we have the example for a study for exporting your coffee to Europe. Next, please. Tips for finding European coffee buyers. And so this is our small introduction on CBI, the work we do. I would like to give the floor to Gustavo and Lisanne, who will take you through our presentation today. And they will introduce themselves. Good luck, and thank you very much for attending, and hope the information will be very useful for you.
Thank you, Lisanne, for the introduction. So maybe just to quickly introduce myself. I'm Gustavo Ferro. I'm working as an independent consultant, and I'm associate expert for Profound, the one that has actually the mandate for producing the studies on for CBI, for coffee and cacao. And I have been working for 13 years in different projects for international trade and development. Within coffee, actually, I've been a market analyst for CBI since 2008 in one way or another. And I do have some other work experience in coffee with other different organizations as well. And Lisanne, can you introduce yourself as well, please?
Yes, so hi everyone, I'm Lisanne Groothuis, I'm Dutch, but based in Colombia. And I work for the Dutch consultancy company Profound, where together with the team, we facilitate sustainable trade promotion. And we do so by providing market intelligence services, supporting compliance, and we facilitate market access activities. My key expertise in the coffee is in the coffee and cacao sector. And well, today I'm here with Gustavo because together we write the market studies for both sectors. So yeah, let's continue.
Thank you, Lisanne. And of course, we have also a sector expert to collaborate with Jeroen Kroeft, who is giving us advice and exchanging ideas. So Jeroen, thank you. I think you're there. So just to also acknowledge your work here. And so as Jantine already said, coffee is one of the 14 sectors that we write for in CBI, and this information is actually, what we try to do is to translate this information to SMEs, to exporters in producing countries, basically. So it's, we try as much as possible to have very simple and practical language, and this is what you're going to find in the studies, is that not only do you have the information, but you also have some tips and tools that you can use. And this is how we try to give these webinars as well, by giving you guys some tips and tools as well, how to investigate further. What we would advise you guys, if English is not your native language, or if you do not feel comfortable reading English, of course, you can always use the translate function on your browser so that you can read that in your own languages. And most importantly, these studies are, of course, free of charge, and we are happy to produce them for you. So today we're going to discuss the East European market for coffee, and this is because we get a lot of requests actually about markets that are not so well publicized, you know, markets that are not so well investigated, and Eastern Europe is one of them. We get a lot of questions on that, and last year we decided to actually produce a document which addresses the coffee market in this one region. So just to let you guys know, of course, this is a presentation that has a certain length. So if you do need to know more, if you want to know exactly the statistics, the further information, you can always access this study on the CBI website as well. And so I encourage you guys to do that, and the link is right here. So how are we going to present today? So basically, we're exploring the potential in Eastern Europe for coffee. So of course, I'm going to give you guys an overview of the coffee market, especially when compared to Western Europe. What are the main differences, and what are the main traits of this market, and a little bit about the trade structure, market profile. And then Lisanne will tell a little bit about the market trends in Eastern Europe. So in addition to all the numbers and everything, how is the market, you know, like functioning there? And what are the main trends also related to COVID at the moment? And then we're going to give you guys some insights on how to find buyers in this region. As you guys know, we did have a webinar some weeks, or actually some months ago already, on how to find buyers. So now we're actually applying this methodology to find buyers in Eastern Europe. I'll give you guys the link for this webinar later. And then at the end, hopefully we have some time for questions and discussion. If not, Jantine already told you guys, we will answer all the questions which are coming in, and this will be provided to you after the webinar. So let's begin. I first would like to draw maybe the profile of Western Europe, just to compare a little bit with Eastern Europe. So what you see in the main European markets, so to speak, or overall, is that the largest markets are in Western Europe. So you have Germany, France, Italy. The exception here is Poland, of course, because it does have a big population, Spain and Netherlands. And the per capita consumption is highest in the northern countries. So you have Finland, Norway, Iceland, with more than 9 kilos per year of consumption of coffee. And then you have Netherlands, Sweden, basically the North European countries where you can find the highest per capita consumption. So we see two things here. The largest markets are where you have a high number of inhabitants. So the big countries, you have high absolute consumption. Any markets where you have per capita coffee consumption are usually located in Northern Europe. But what is happening in Eastern Europe? So as you can see here, we only have one star, which is one of the largest markets being Poland. But this is mainly because of the size of the population. So I invite you guys to just take a closer look at what is happening in Eastern Europe in terms of consumption of coffee and on the main traits of this market. So Eastern Europe in general accounts for more or less 18% of the coffee consumption in the EU. And this is considering, of course, the EU countries. So when you talk about Eastern Europe, we are not considering at this point, we're not considering Russia, Ukraine. We are considering mostly the countries that are within the European Union. So whenever we talk about the statistics, etc., we are talking about EU, Eastern Europe. The largest markets in this region are Poland with almost 7% of total EU consumption. And then you have the smaller, but still the big ones compared to other East European countries, which are Romania with 2.5%, Hungary with 1.8%. And at the same time, we see quite a big growth in consumption in some of these markets. So Slovenia, for example, had an increase in consumption of 18%, Czech Republic of 15%, Romania of 15% as well. When we talk about European coffee market, we talk about a very saturated type of market. So seeing this kind of growth, seeing this kind of double-digit growth is actually quite telling about the potential in development for this East European market. Here, put some examples for you guys also on the per capita coffee consumption. This is not like necessarily in order, and it does not include, of course, all the markets, but just so you guys can see some examples of Slovenia, for example, with a 5.8 kilo per capita a year, Croatia with 5.1, which is more or less what you can see in the average West European consumption as well. And then you have the countries that are more traditionally tea consumers. So you have Poland, more in Central Europe, Czech Republic, with lower per capita consumption of coffee. So you can see that there's still a lot of ground to be conquered on the East European coffee market. So this is good news. I also would like to talk about the East European context in terms of how coffee enters the East European market. So what you can see here is that the total imports of the EU of coffee is more or less 7.3 billion euros. So that's quite big. And when you look at the total imports of Eastern Europe, you have more or less 6% of that. So 471 million euros. So that's actually quite small compared to the potential that it has, compared to the population and compared to the area of Eastern Europe. So again, the point is there's a lot of potential there. And when you look at the direct imports of Eastern Europe from producing countries, even smaller, is around 4% of the total EU imports. So you're talking about a very limited market. So when we are talking about things later, I think what is important to keep in mind that it's very specific, very small, even though it has a lot of potential to expand. What is important to say is that quite a big share, I would say, yeah, almost 40% of Eastern Europe imports of coffee are coming via the European Union. So Germany is the biggest one, and then you have countries within Eastern Europe also fueling this market. So you have Slovenia, you have Italy here, Belgium, Netherlands, Greece, and other countries. So you see Germany here has a big growth, both because Germany is a big hub for imports of coffee, but also because of its location, which is a gateway to Eastern Europe as well. And you see Italy here, and we're going to have a closer look at Italy, the relationship between Italy and Slovenia as well, because Italy is also serving as a gateway to Eastern Europe due to its location and its big role as a trade hub for coffee. When you talk about the direct imports of Eastern Europe from producing countries, we see that, well, it's not too bad. It's 61% of the total imports of Eastern Europe of coffee. But what you do see here is that Vietnam is the big supplier. So we're talking about a market that it's still quite focused on lower qualities, on a market that is focused on sometimes instant coffees. So Vietnam has an important role because a big producer supplier of the Robusta type coffees. You have Brazil, which is also, big supplier, big producer of coffee, Colombia as well. And then you start seeing other Robusta suppliers, India, Uganda, and then you see more the Arabicas and more towards specialty, Honduras, Peru, Mexico, etc. So you see that still the market's quite geared towards the lower quality, towards instant coffees, etc. But you see that there is a drive and increase in specialty and in origins which are more focused on the Arabicas and on specialty markets. So this is the main message here. Of course, when you read the survey, you can see also the increase of each supplier as well. We don't have so much time to address specifically here, but you can see that there are some countries that are increasing their presence in this market as well. I would like to maybe apply this into looking at specific markets in Eastern Europe, and let's look at the biggest one. So we're looking at Poland, which has 123,000 tons of imports, and this is more or less 3% of EU imports of green coffee. And you can see that a big share, 77% of Polish imports are actually coming via Germany mostly. You can see 70% is coming via Germany. And directly from producing countries, 23%. And Brazil, Vietnam, Uganda, again, India, Colombia are the biggest suppliers. But yeah, you can see the role of Brazil here being very important. And important to understand what is happening here is to look at the structure of the market in Poland. So let me just break it down for you guys what is happening here. You can see that a big presence of multinationals. So you can see that Polska, which is the biggest importer of coffee in Poland, is actually part of the Neumann Group from Germany. You also have the presence of Olam with a marketing office. So you can see that, let's say, the bulk of this market, and you have big players active there. You do have a few specialized importers. You guys can read about that in the study, and some direct imports from a few roasters as well, from a few smaller roasters that you guys can check out the names and how it works exactly in the study that we produced for you. In terms of the imports via Germany, you can see that there is a relationship there between, of course, Neumann and Polska as the same group. But you also have other players from Germany, a few importers that are actually active in Poland as well, such as Lisanne, etc. And you can see that a lot of the specialty coffees that are also going to roasters in Poland, they're also coming from other specialty importers from Western Europe. So this is very interesting to see how in such a big market, a big share is actually coming via Germany. And well, this is quite explained by, of course, the geography. As you can see, Hamburg is actually quite close to Poland as well. And you can see Gdynia here is the main port where the coffee is coming into Poland, and where Polska is established there. So the distances are not so big, and these countries are actually quite interchanging in terms of supplies as well. And let's look at the case of Slovenia for a moment. So Slovenia has a big share of imports coming directly from producing countries. Brazil is leading with 43%, and then you have the other countries here, and then only 9% coming from intra-European supplies. So what we can see in terms of the imports coming from producing countries, that is actually quite a consolidated market, because there is a certain dominance of the Croatian group, Atlantica group. So you do see that even though there is a high share of imports coming from producing countries, it's also quite a consolidated market and quite small. It's 1% of total EU imports. And then you have the intra-European supplies with 9%, and you can see that a lot of this is coming via Italy. So you have the port of Trieste, which is basically bordering Slovenia. And the port of Trieste is actually accounting for 1/3 of coffee imports. And as I said before, Italy is an important gateway for several East European countries due to this location that you can see here. On the left, you can see Italy. You can see Venice there. You can see the Adriatic Sea. And then you can see Slovenia, capital Ljubljana, and you can see that the ports where the coffee is coming in are actually quite nearby. So you're not talking also about great geographical distances. When you talk about the border between West and Eastern Europe, you have it here. It's just a border between Italy and Slovenia, which is actually quite nearby in terms of the location of the ports. So this is important to keep in mind, and I really like to look at the maps when I'm talking about these things, because then I can see the actual distances and I can see where the importers are located as well. Of course, I invite you guys to also do your own analysis. I'm giving you the sources here. You can do this exercise that I did for all the countries, basically. And when you're doing, when you're targeting markets, it's important to understand these trade flows. So you guys will get this information, and you can use the websites, of course, to do your own exercises. And I'll yield the floor to Lisanne.
Thank you, Gustavo, for giving a context of the trade flows and the market in Eastern Europe. So let's dive a bit deeper into the trends and into the developments we see in the Eastern European coffee market. So the development of a coffee market is often described in terms of waves, where the first wave in Europe started in the 1960s, more or less, and it indicates the popularization of coffee consumption, meaning so much as an increase in coffee drinking at home. The second coffee wave started in the mid-1990s and refers to the upgrade in coffee consumption, so a shift to higher quality coffees. And this second wave, or this period, also welcomes the coffee corners, such as Starbucks, Costa Coffee, like the bigger coffee chains that we see all throughout the world, and also, of course, in Europe. The third wave started in Europe in the mid-2010s, and it indicates a growing demand for specialty coffees, where origin becomes more important, so the origin from the coffee, the processing methods, as well as aspects around sustainability, direct trade, and also traceability of the coffees back to the farm level. So we see that the Eastern European market is living this third wave, has entered this third wave, so meaning that we see an increase in consumer demand for specialty coffees, higher quality coffees. But it's very important to stress here that, first of all, these waves, it's not a linear development. And also, most importantly to say is that although we see that Eastern Europe is living this third wave, it's definitely not everywhere. So it's mainly in urban areas, in the capital cities, in the larger cities of each Eastern European country, where we see this third wave happening. But in other areas, a large part of the market is still requiring a lot of instant coffee and also tea as a hot beverage. So the next slide, Gustavo. So yeah, just to emphasize again, the specialty coffee market, it is a niche market, and also if you compare it to Northern and Western European markets, it's smaller. But we still, we see interesting potential because we see it is growing. And the largest and fastest growing specialty markets within Eastern Europe are the Czech Republic, Poland, Hungary, and Romania. And some indications for that is, for instance, the growing number of specialty coffee shops and micro roasters we see in Eastern Europe. And an interesting way to check out some of these coffee shops and micro roasters are through the European Coffee Trip website, which has this great country, where you can see on the slide, great country chapters, let's say it that way, where you can see which cities have which shops and micro roasters. And over the years, doing our research of the European coffee markets, we've seen the number of shops and roasters in Eastern Europe increase. So this is a first indication. Then on the other hand, we also see a large and a growing number of coffee festivals that have been organized in Eastern Europe. I just put several examples here, which are all held in the capital cities. And so I just mentioned 5, but this is not. There are more. So this is also an invitation to you to check the internet or check the country to see which other coffee festivals are there. Which some other examples are also given in our study. And these coffee festivals are mainly focused on specialty coffee, roasted specialty coffee. So this is another indication of an increasing interesting specialty coffee scene in Eastern Europe. And a last indication is that we see that more and more actors within the Eastern European countries, within the coffee sector, have been joining the Specialty Coffee Association. Also, a growing number of countries have their own Specialty Coffee Association chapters. And for the coffee festivals as well as the Specialty Coffee Association, we will dive a bit deeper into these in the next section when we will talk about finding buyers. So in the next slide, when we talk about specialty coffee, we have to talk also about COVID-19, because, well, specialty coffee is often consumed, or a large outlet for specialty coffee is out-of-home consumption. And well, this has been hit quite hard during the COVID-19 situation. So in 2020, so last year, some industry sources have indicated that there has been a sharp decrease of over 50%, I believe 56% decrease in out-of-home consumption in Europe. I guess the good news is that some growth is expected again this year, especially in the second half of 2021. But although no one can look into the future, just to give some prediction and indication, it's not expected that the pre-crisis levels will be reached before 2022. So yeah, there has been quite a shift, and now we're just talking about out-of-home consumption because, of course, specialty coffees are also sold through e-commerce, etc. But yeah, I just want to focus on the out-of-home consumption here, because also in Eastern Europe, if we dive a bit deeper or look a bit more into depth in the Eastern European market, we see some behavior changes where coffee consumption has become more functional, so less of a social activity, which of course, yeah, makes sense if you think about all the lockdowns, the curfews, the social distancing measurements, etc. That coffee has become more of a functional. Let's fastly drink a cup of coffee instead of hanging out with friends or colleagues to enjoy a cup of coffee. And to just dive in a bit deeper into one country, we picked Poland as one of the bigger markets, and we thought it's important to highlight what is happening there. And the Coffee Association, the Polish Coffee Association, conducted a study of out-of-home coffee consumption in the country, where you can see in this chart I put there that where the red bars indicate November 2020, so during the pandemic, and the blue bar is February 2020, right before the COVID-19 situation hit Europe or hit Poland. And two things are interesting to mention here. On the one hand, you can see that the petrol stations and grocery stores have increased. There's an increasing coffee consumption at these establishments, at these places, at the cost of cafes, bars, and restaurants, where coffee consumption has gone down. And what this actually means is that mainly at petrol stations and grocery stores, there's more of a mainstream coffee quality that is served, whereas in the cafes and bars and restaurants, usually it's a bit of a higher quality. So here you can see the impact of COVID-19, not only on where the coffee is consumed, but also what it does, how it shifts a bit the quality of coffee that is mainly being consumed. And again, here, it's difficult to look into the future. For sure, many people, or a large share of people, would go back to previous habits, where they will go back to the bars and restaurants to drink their specialty coffee or their preferred coffee. But also in general, all over the world, and also in Poland and Eastern Europe, remote working has become quite popular, meaning that the coffee shops, etc., that are located near offices in the city centers it is probable that they will see a decrease of sales because people would work from home, and yeah. So this is just to share some context on the COVID situation. And then I would like to move to the certification in the Eastern European market, because I think, again, here the main message is, if you compare it to other European markets, the Northern and Western European market, the Eastern European market is different. It's a bit smaller, but well, we coined it the awakening market because you can see that there is an increasing there is an increase in certified coffees available on the market. Again, it is a niche market. I think it's important to just repeat myself there. But if we focus specifically on Woods and Rainforest Alliance, it's interesting to see because, as Gustavo already mentioned, a lot of coffee actually enters through other Northern and Western European markets, and also the the roasted coffee, so the final products also enter through other markets on the Eastern European market. And these large multinational players, they often over the past years, they have made specific sustainability commitments, meaning, for instance, I picked as an example Ahold Delhaize, which is a Belgium-Dutch retailer group active in all over Europe. And so as their sustainability commitment, they have said that they would commit to 100% certified coffees for their private label products, either UTZ Rainforest Alliance, Fairtrade, or organic or equivalent. But that means that the retailers, the supermarkets owned by Ahold houses such as Albert, which is one of the larger supermarket chains in Czech Republic, in their supermarket, on their shelves, you will find all the private label products with UTZ, in this case with the UTZ Rainforest Alliance certified standard. So this is the picture there. I don't know if you can see, but in the orange circle, you can see the logo. So if we go to the next slide, we will see the situation on Fairtrade coffee, which again here, like a Lidl, which is a large retailer group in Europe, they also made a similar sustainability commitment to mainly source Fairtrade coffee. So you will also see that the private label brands in supermarkets will hold Fairtrade certified standards in the supermarkets in Eastern Europe. But in general, Fairtrade, there are no national Fairtrade organizations in Eastern Europe, but we see that Poland, Czech Republic, and Slovakia have marketing branches. And there we see that, especially in those countries, the visibility and the recognizability of the Fairtrade standard is growing. So this is, I think, an interesting development. And we see also that the overall Fairtrade retail sales is growing in the region. And as an example, I picked out Czech Republic. In the chart or in the graph on the right, you will see that the sales of Fairtrade coffees on the Czech market in 2019 reached 891 tons of green coffee. And compared to 2016, you can see that it's quite a stable growth. So that's interesting. But it is important to put it in perspective again. On the right side, you see this gray bar, which actually goes through the roof of the slide. Because if you look at the Fairtrade sales in Germany, it reached in 2019 almost 23,000 tons. So just it shows that we are talking about a fairly less volumes in the Eastern European market, in the Czech Republic in this case. But the main message is it is a niche market, but it is growing. And I think also important to mention, quite interesting, is that petrol stations are among the leading sales channels for Fairtrade coffees, especially in Poland and in the Czech Republic. And as we just saw on the previous slide for COVID-19, the consumption at petrol stations is actually going up. So this is also an interesting indication. You have probably an increase in Fairtrade coffees on the Eastern European markets. Then the last organic certification, to just also talk about this one is, again, I'm just repeating myself, I'm sorry, but it is a relatively small market in Eastern Europe with low consumer spending on organic products. The organic retail sales is maximum 2% of total food sales, but it's more likely to be less than 1%. But also here we see that the market is growing. Especially in the Baltic states, in the Baltic countries, Lithuania, Estonia, and Latvia, we see that it's growing rather fast. So this is an interesting development. And this growth is often linked to a growing consumer awareness of organic products, mainly because they are perceived as healthier options, and because of that also often as higher quality products. So the largest organic markets in Eastern Europe are Poland, followed by Czech Republic and Croatia. And we talk here about total organic markets, where Poland reached organic retail sales of 314 million euros in 2019. It's difficult to come about specific data on coffee, but we think like to just show you a general picture of the organic markets is actually a good indication of the size and also the growth figures, which are more in depth explained in our study. Again, here, just to compare, the largest European organic market is Germany, and there organic retail sales reached over 11 billion euro, which is, I did a calculation, which is 38 times bigger. So it's just again showing the comparable sizes. On the right side of this slide, I put 3 buyers, and this is just to show you that there are importers as well as roasters that focus on certified coffees, not only on organic, also on Rainforest Alliance, UTZ, or fair trade. And it just shows that there is a possible market prospect for sustainably certified coffees. I think, yeah, on the next slide, we will go a bit further into finding buyers. And then I will give the word again to Gustavo to start off there.
Yeah, thanks, Lisanne. As I said before, we had a workshop, a webinar some weeks ago on finding buyers. Not some weeks ago, I can see here the 16th of November. So it's not some weeks ago, it's actually some months ago. On finding buyers, you guys can find the link here where we explain the process of finding buyers. So basically on using different databases and materials for free in order to find good leads for you guys to contact or to establish some commercial relationships. And we're going to show 2 examples here of ways to find buyers specifically applied for Eastern Europe. So here I'm going to be discussing the sector and trade associations, where we can find the members of this coffee sector and trade associations as being potential buyers. And Lisanne will speak more about trade fairs and coffee festivals as also being interesting databases for you to do the same exercise, because they also have participants and specific lists that you guys can use as your own databases for that. It's very important, and this is a bit like a disclaimer and a bit of a repetition of the previous webinar we did, but I find it important to emphasize that it's very important that you define your objectives and your geographical scope when you're doing that. It can be based on the statistics, it can be based on a gut feeling. Whatever you use, just make sure to be clear on your objectives and on what your proposition is. And also on when you're locating a buyer, to ask some questions. What are their main activities? Is it an importer, a roaster? Do they deal directly with origin? And yes, and so on, just to really check on yourself in terms of your proposition, and on the potential buyer, what is their profile. So it's important that you do this match between yourself and the members of these associations that I'm going to show you. When you're looking through sector associations, what is important is, as I said before, looking into the profile of these associations, what product categories or what segment do they cover, and also the types of members they have. And these are interrelated, of course. So here, I'm just going to give you guys the example of the specialty coffee associations, the national chapters in Poland and in Bulgaria. Actually, none of the national associations for coffee in Eastern Europe are part of the European Coffee Federation, which I found quite strange when I entered the website of the European Coffee Federation. So I will use the specialty coffee associations to do this exercise. So we start with Poland just to apply this. And this is the first thing that I see when I enter this website of the national chapter for Poland's Specialty Coffee Association. I cannot understand anything because I don't speak Polish. So the first thing that I did was to activate the translate function in the browser. So I can actually read what I'm searching for, which is the members list. And this is what of course, you can also search for other things. You can see the events, you can see any other market studies, videos, etc. But what I'm searching for here is mainly the members list. So when I use the translate function, is much better because I can actually see where to find this members list. So I can see it here. And what I found interesting about this one is that you can find a mixture, like a mixed audience, where you find traders, roasters, and also some other stakeholders. For example, the fair trade Polska, you can see some smaller roasters as well. So it's like different stakeholders that you can see as being part of this association. So this is automatically like a database that you can use in order to search for buyers or companies that you'd like to collaborate with. Another way, of course, and this is the example of Bulgaria, which I found quite interesting, is because you do not have specifically like a website. So your search needs to be a little bit different. You need to check for some like movements that are happening here on the Facebook page, for example. So what can you do with a Facebook page to find buyers? Well, you can look at the related pages, for example. You can look at the likes, or you can look at the events that they are promoting, so that you can start shaping up. You can start sort of like diagnosing what this market looks like. So it's actually quite interesting, because once you start exploring these associations, you can kind of like use them as an umbrella to start searching for specific companies that are participating in their activities. So you centralize your search a little bit more when you do that. And you can do that with websites, Facebook, whatever. But as long as you try and find, you know, like the specific movements that are happening within those online tools, basically. Lisanne?
Yeah, so about the coffee festivals and fairs, again, like it's quite interesting to look at the participants of different fairs and events of coffee. It's important to mention there are, of course, many different types of fairs active in different market segments. There are fairs only focused on coffee, but in all segments and all types of products. There are fairs specific for organic or fair trade, so more for certified products. So not only coffee, but just in general. BioFuck is a good example for that, which just happened last week, well, the largest organic trade fair in the world. And there are, of course, coffee events and festivals, which mainly focus on roasted specialty coffee. So what is important if you enter one of the websites or one of the fairs is, of course, to investigate what is the main focus of the fair, what kind of exhibitor or visitor profile can I expect, or am I, yeah, it's in that sense also important, of course, to know what you are looking for, what kind of coffee do you have to offer, and what kind of visitor profile or exhibitor profile would match your offer. And when going on scrolling through these websites, some standard questions you can ask is just, is this directed at consumers, more towards the business aspect, so roasters, importers? Is there a focus on roasted coffee? Is there a focus on green coffee, on certified products? Yes, no. So these are just some questions to investigate the focus of a fair or an event. And so I would like to just dive a bit deeper into the world of coffee trade fair, which is, I think on the next slide, it's the largest European trade fairs focused on specialty coffee. And if you go on their website, it's quite clear that right away that they deal with specialty coffees. They even have, if you go to the exhibitor profile, the floor map they call it, if I remember well, there's this interesting special roasters village, which is like a market where kind of roasters are dealing with specifically specialty coffees. But what I find most interesting, if I went to the advanced search tool, you can click on countries, so select on countries, and here the print screen I made only went to Portugal. Of course, there are more countries participating in the trade fair. But up to Portugal, the only two Eastern European countries I found were Hungary and Poland, which doesn't mean that in other countries, of course, there are no actors active in the specialty coffee scene, but it just shows that if you are looking for buyers in a specific niche market, it really requires you to dive a bit deeper, because the main coffee fairs or the main fairs will not be or present you with all the options. So that's why in the next slide we are going to a coffee festival. In this case, I picked the Warsaw Coffee Festival in Poland. And coffee festivals, if you will scroll a bit on the website, it's quite it becomes quite clear that this is more like a promotional event, like a business to consumer event, focused on roasted coffee, specialty coffees. And if you go to again, this website was actually in Polish, just like Gustavo, I don't speak any Polish, so I translated the website. And so if you go to the exhibitor button, a whole range of actors will appear, which is interesting because you can see many smaller companies, mostly roasters, but also other types of actors active in the specialty coffee scene in Warsaw. And you can also see some specialized importers like Rehm & Co, which is on the bottom right, which is an importer from Germany. And as Gustavo already explained in the beginning, Poland, a lot of coffee that enters Poland is coffees of any type of quality enters a lot through Germany. So this is also just it's reinforcing what we already found out during the trade statistics exercise. And on the next slide, there is an example of the Prague Coffee Festival in the Czech Republic. And here, I just put it here to show, it's a bit like what Gustavo also said, like not all pages will have an exhibitor profile ready or an exhibitor list. Sometimes it requires a bit of a creative searching. So in this case, the Prague Coffee Festival didn't have any exhibitor list, but if you go to the gallery, for instance, you will find pictures of the fair where you can have a look on maybe on people active there, or the stands, the names that are mentioned there. But also here on the partners, it's quite interesting to see who's actually partnering up with this coffee festival, because there are some roasters, there are some importers. So this is another great, interesting way to go around the page and see what kind of information there is and what kind of people are active in a specific coffee scene in a specific country. In the next slide, in the last slide, it's just to briefly, okay, so we are doing this exercise of finding a buyer, but what's next? Like, I think it's always important to create a sort of a system to organize buyers, meaning that you can pick some parameters such as a certification, the business philosophy of a specific buyer, the origins they already source from, the quality they are looking for, and make a system and to qualify your coffee and your buyer and to see whether there is a match or not. And if you think there is a match between your offer and what a buyer is looking for, I would definitely say approach them. Usually trade fairs are a very good way of meeting and getting in touch with buyers. Of course, during the COVID-19 times, it's a bit more complicated. So I would say it's also interesting to just write tailored emails to specific persons. I emphasize to specific persons. On the website, you can, on the website of a buyer, you might find who is the sourcing manager or the procurement manager of a specific company. Also on LinkedIn pages, you can find a lot of information of specific people working at an organization. So you can send your email directly to someone. And yeah, it would be, for instance, you can include or attach like specific fact sheets of your coffee offer and other interesting details that make you stand out from your competition. So I put a link here for other tips. I hope during this presentation we have create some enthusiasm with you to actually go to the CBI webpage to check out what kind of other studies are there, because this doing business study is full of other tips of how to do business with European coffee buyers. And then it's the end of the session, so I think we go back to Jan-Tien.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Lisanne and Gustavo, for your very nice presentation and good explanation on the Eastern European market, and also how to find your buyers and how to target this, and what kind of tools you would have to find them. We have not so many questions, so either it was very clear. I would like to maybe, if you could explain one little thing a little bit better for the attendees, is that you were talking about certification on fair trade, especially the slide on Poland, Czech Republic and Slovakia, that they use to have the marketing branches. Could you explain a little bit what you mean with that?
Yeah, so there, I'm not muted, no. So the fair trade organizations, they have specific national organizations that, if I'm very honest, I'm not exactly sure what they all do, but there is a distinction between the fair trade organizations and only marketing branches who mainly work on the marketing aspect, so on marketing fair trade products, as well as to increase the visibility of the fair trade brands, the logo, what fair trade stands for.
Increase market on consumption side. Promotional campaigns,
yeah. Thank you for clarifying a little bit this issue. Now you were just briefly mentioning the BioFuck, which happened last week online, and I know that both you were part of the BioFuck. Could you maybe share a little bit the experience of firstly being first time I think that we have such a big trade fair in organic products online, and if there are any new developments we might want to share with the attendees on organic products, and then of course towards coffee.
Lisanne, do you want to go? Maybe I can talk about my experience very quickly, and then we go to coffee specifically. Just in terms of the platform, BioFuck Online, what I found interesting is that you have the participants, both exhibitors and visitors, as persons. So you can see who a buyer is and who a sourcing manager is. So you can differentiate these persons. That when you have like the databases in the physical trade fair, usually it's per company, not per person. So this was quite interesting. And of course, we want to emphasize BioFuck is in Germany, but we just use as an example of a trade fair where you could find also possibly buyers from Eastern Europe that are active in organic as well. This is just to emphasize here. For organic, sorry, Lisanne, maybe you can tell about your experience.
Yeah, well, so what is quite interesting, I think, is on these fairs, it's a great way to meet who's active, or to see who's active in the organic realm. But it shows quite some innovative new products in organic and also in coffee. I have to be very honest that I didn't look into this so much, because also this week we are still in the BioFuck. So this was also on my agenda to actually look into the new developments of the organic related to coffee. So yeah.
Yeah, I can comment on that because it's something that we also talked about last year, and we even published an article. You guys can find it on the CBI website as well. That because of the concentration of coffee consumption in supermarkets, that people were buying not only coffee but all consumer goods through supermarkets, and because supermarkets are investing private labels with certification, there was an automatic increase in consumption of organic coffees and fair trade coffees or certified coffees in general. And specifically for organic, for the countries that have figures for organic consumption, not only coffee but in general, the market for organic increased faster than consumption of like conventional products as comparison in terms of growth, absolute growth.
Good, thank you very much. We have, I'm just trying to get some questions from the attendees. As we mentioned before, we are not able to answer all of them. They are coming in at the moment, so due to the time, but we will all answer these after the webinar, as we explained before. Maybe you can explain one more time, maybe, why Germany has this huge advantage of the imports compared to, so on the intra-European importation compared to the rest of the European countries.
Why Germany is a hub?
Yeah, why that the difference is so big compared to the other countries?
I think Germany for Eastern Europe is both the specialization of Germany in terms of having a market which is directed for that. So a larger number of, let's say, traditional, innovative importers as well. There is a certain dynamic of the market that also has the logistics, storage, warehousing, whatever you can imagine, that is well developed. And in my opinion, for Eastern Europe, meaning also the geographical proximity.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then the other one is we were talking about certification. We all know we also have the ICO certification, whereby 22,000 is also used within coffee, within the value chain. Is this valuable for coffee exporters to the Eastern European markets?
I think this is not a specific, it's not something that is specific for the region, but for the type of importer. As you saw, there are several multinational importers that are also present on this market. So I think you can expect similar, but you would have to analyze in terms of the profile of these buyers and not necessarily where they are located. And I expected this question, and also related to quality. I thought we were going to have a question on that as well. But I think what you can expect is that you need to profile buyers not only about where they are located, but also in terms of the products that they are specialized in. So I think you have to do a per case analysis of the type of buyer, and not necessarily because they're in Eastern Europe, this is not applicable.
Okay. And is Eastern Europe for the selling to the Eastern European markets? Is they how much is known on the direct trade principles, which is also kind of increasing on if you look into trends of coffee?
Yeah. Maybe Lisanne, you can answer because you did the trends. If I have something to complement, I can go ahead. But I think having done the trends, you have this insight.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure if I understand the question well, as in like how much Eastern European countries or actors know about the direct trade concept, or but what we see also when I go through, when I checked out some interesting buyer profiles in Eastern Europe, we find that there are some smaller roasters that actually make their direct linkages back to origin. And of course, then you talk about smaller, higher quality coffees, smaller amount, but there are some roasters active on the Eastern European market that have this direct linkages with origin. And sometimes also these roasters might import through specialized importers, but they still, as a company, have this direct linkage to origin to know what is happening at farm level, etc. So sometimes it's direct, that it's not so common that the roast is actually direct import. It happens sometimes, but it's also just that these actors are in direct contact with the source, with origin.
Yeah, maybe to complement, as Lisanne said, there are pockets of third wave also in Eastern Europe. So you see that as being also a third wave concept, this contact with origin, and we can see in specific roasters as well, this direct trade, and a few importers as well, doing some sort of relationship with origin. And this is interesting because you guys can actually read some examples in the study as well of some real cases that we actually mentioned there.
Yeah, maybe to emphasize this, what you're saying, Gustavo, indeed, is that throughout our studies, we use the real examples of companies who already tapped into those trends and are constantly doing well under these trends. So it's good to use these indeed as an example and to see how they have developed themselves on these kind of subjects. We do have a very small question, but I think it's good to emphasize it's the question if this is based for green coffee or roasted coffee, but I think we should emphasize that it's all based on green coffee.
Yeah, the statistics that I showed were also green coffee imports.
Yeah, so because roasted coffee, yeah, is a different type of business if you start exporting from a origin country roasted coffee. I think we have answered due to the time. We leave it here for terms of the questions, well, as mentioned many times before, we shall share these all, as well as the presentation, as well as the recorded webinar. I would like to thank you again, Lisanne and Gustavo, for sharing all this valuable information on this subject, and I hope all our attendees have also valued this information. And I would like to thank you all for taking your time to listen to us and to attend this webinar. And I hope to see you in our next webinar, which you will be invited, or we will publish that on our website. And for now, I wish you all a very nice evening, morning, afternoon. Thank you very much again.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.